Good afternoon, students. Today's class is on pharmacotherapy of tuberculosis, part 1. Pharmacotherapy of tuberculosis, part 1. Coming to the introduction of the tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is caused by mycobacteria. Mycobacteria also cause Mycobacterium avium complex disease and leprosy. Tuberculosis is the leading worldwide cause of death due to infectious disease. The first line agents which are used for the treatment, they are having greatest efficacy with acceptable degree of toxicity. Most of the patients do not require second line drugs. They are successfully treated by the first line drugs. Now coming to the classification of the drugs used in tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is treated by first line anti-tubercular drugs also known as the standard drugs and the second line anti-tubercular drugs known as the reserve drugs. The first line drugs are having high efficacy with low toxicity. They are routinely used. They are the isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide, ethambutol and streptomycin. The second line drugs are known as the reserve drugs. They are having low efficacy and high toxicity. They are used only when the first line drugs cannot be used or to supplement them. These are the para-aminosalicylic acid also known as PAS, thiacetazone, cycloserine, ethionamide, kanamycin, capreomycin, amikacin, moxifloxacin, levofloxacin, ofloxacin, clarithromycin, clofazimine, rifabutin and rifapentin. Coming to the other type of classification, this is done according to the groups. Group 1 drugs are the first line oral drugs. Drugs given by oral route, which are the first line drugs, and these are the isoniazid, rifampin, pyrazinamide and ethambutol. Group 2 is the injectable drugs. These are the streptomycin, kanamycin, amikacin and capreomycin. Then group 3 are the fluoroquinolones. They are the ofloxacin, levofloxacin, moxifloxacin and the ciprofloxacin. Group 4 are the second line oral drugs. These are the ethionamide, cycloserine, para-aminosalicylic acid, rifabutin and rifapentin. Group 5 are the drugs with unclear efficacy. These are the bedaquiline, clarithromycin, clofazimine, coamoxiclav and imipenem. Group 1 and Group 2 drugs are used are the first line drugs. They are highly efficacious. Group 3 drugs are used in multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. Group 4 is also used in multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, while the Group 5 are having unclear efficacy and they are used in extensively resistant tuberculosis or the XDR-TB. Now let us see about the isoniazid. Isoniazid is also known as the isonicotinic acid hydrazide. So that is its full form, isoniazid, isonicotinic acid hydrazide. It is a tuberculocidal drug. It acts on the rapidly multiplying organism or rapidly dividing organisms. They are killed while the dormant bacilli are only inhibited. So it is bactericidal for the rapidly multiplying organisms and bacteriostatic for the dormant bacilli, which are only inhibited. It acts on both intracellular as well as extracellular bacilli. Intracellular bacilli are those bacilli which are present inside the macrophages. So it acts both extracellularly as well as intracellularly. It is effective in acidic medium as well as alkaline medium. And it is the cheapest drug available, cheapest anti-tubercular drug available. Coming to the mechanism of action of the isoniazid. Isoniazid is a prodrug and it is converted to the active metabolite by the enzyme Mycobacterial catalase peroxidase. So this enzyme converts it into the active metabolite. It inhibits the synthesis of the mycolic acids. Now mycolic acids are an important component of the mycobacterial cell wall. They are unique to the mycobacteria. They are long branched lipids that are attached to the unique polysaccharides in the mycobacterial cell wall. The target enzyme of isoniazid is the enoyl ACP reductase. So this is the target enzyme on which the isoniazid act, that is the enoyl ACP reductase of the fatty acid synthase 2, which converts the unsaturated fatty acids to the saturated fatty acids in the mycolic acid biosynthesis. And once this enzyme is inhibited, there is no conversion of unsaturated fatty acid to the saturated fatty acids, and the mycolic acid biosynthesis is inhibited, is thus stopped. And in this way the cell wall cannot be formed, and there is a interruption in the formation of the mycobacterial cell wall because of inhibition of synthesis of the mycolic acids, which are an important component of the mycobacterial cell wall. Now coming to the resistance of the isoniazid. Acquired resistance develops to the isoniazid, which results from the mutations in the enzyme catalase peroxidase enzyme, and this will decrease the activity of the enzyme, and it will prevent the conversion of the product to its active metabolite. So the active metabolite is not formed, and so further action does not take place. In this way the mycobacteria develop resistance to the isoniazid. Second mechanism is mutations which occur in the genes which are involved in the mycolic acid biosynthesis. So in this way the target genes are changed, or there are mutations occurring in the target gene, and that's why the action of the isoniazid on the target enzyme does not take place, and so there is no inhibition of mycolic acid biosynthesis. This is also one mechanism by which the mycobacteria develop resistance to the isoniazid. Monotherapy leads to resistance. So if isoniazid is given alone, resistance develops rapidly within few weeks of therapy. Coming to the primary resistance. So primary resistance to the isoniazid is seen. 1 in every 10 raised to 6 tubercle bacilli will be genetically resistant to the isoniazid. So 1 in 10 raised to 6 tubercle bacilli will be genetically resistant to the isoniazid. Now coming to the resistance of the isoniazid. Isoniazid selects for the resistant bacteria. If it is given alone, such bacilli proliferate selectively, and after 2 to 3 months the infection is due to the apparently resistant organisms. So in this way after 2 to 3 months apparently resistant infection emergences if the INH or isoniazid is given alone because of selection for the resistant bacteria. Incidence of primary resistance in India is around 18%. Incidence of primary resistance to the INH alone in India is 18%. So this is a great incidence, and hence it should never be used alone. It should not be given alone. It should be always combined with other anti-tubercular drugs. Now coming to the pharmacokinetics of the isoniazid. Isoniazid is given by the oral route. It is completely absorbed after given orally. It is widely distributed. Metabolized in the liver by N-acetylation. Metabolites are excreted in the urine. Rate of INH acetylation shows genetic variation. Some are slow acetylators and some are fast acetylators. So in this way there is a difference in the rate of acetylation in various individuals. It depends on the genetics. Inter-individual variation is seen in the rate of acetylation of the INH. Adverse reactions are more in the slow acetylators, and therapeutic failure is more in the fast acetylators. So in the individuals who metabolize the drug slowly, in them the incidence of adverse reaction is high, while in those individuals which metabolize the drug fast, therapeutic failure can be seen for the INH. So this depends on the genetic constitution of the individual. Now coming to the adverse reactions of the isoniazid. The most important adverse reaction of isoniazid is peripheral neuritis, which is characterized by the paresthesia, numbness, mental disturbances and convulsions. So this peripheral neuritis is due to deficiency of the vitamin B complex. It is a dose dependent toxicity. Higher the dose, more will be the toxicity, and this is due to interference with the production of the active coenzyme pyridoxal phosphate from the pyridoxine and the increased excretion of this coenzyme in the urine. So increased excretion of the pyridoxine occurs and pyridoxine does not get converted to the active coenzyme pyridoxal phosphate. So both are the reasons why there is a peripheral neuritis or there is a deficiency of pyridoxine because of its increased excretion in the urine. Now what is the role of pyridoxal phosphate? Pyridoxal phosphate acts as a coenzyme in the synthesis of different amino acids, and so this is interfered with, and hence the deficiency of pyridoxine leads to the peripheral neuritis. Now continuing with the adverse reaction to the isoniazid, if pyridoxine is given in the dose of 10 mg per kg prophylactically along with the isoniazid, it prevents the neurotoxicity due to the isoniazid. Prophylactic pyridoxine should be given to almost all the patients as well as to the patients of diabetes, chronic alcoholics, malnourished individuals, pregnancy, lactation and in HIV infected person. If there is neurotoxicity due to the INH, it can be treated by giving pyridoxine 100 mg per day. Then second adverse reaction is the hepatitis. Hepatitis is commonly seen in the elderly and in chronic alcoholics. Alcoholism induces the enzyme CYP2E1 which generates hepatotoxic metabolites which damage the hepatocytes. Hepatotoxicity is reversible on stopping the drug. Coming to the drug interactions of the isoniazid. Isoniazid is an enzyme inhibitor. So it inhibits the metabolism of the warfarin, phenytoin and theophylline. It may increase the blood levels of these drugs and that will lead to the toxicity of these drugs. Like warfarin, there can be more bleeding and increase the toxicity of theophylline as well as phenytoin. So these drugs should not be combined with the INH. Then para-aminosalicylic acid inhibits the metabolism of the INH or the isoniazid and prolong the half-life of the isoniazid. Now coming to the next first line drug, that is the rifampicin. Rifampicin belongs to rifamycins. Rifamycins are the rifampicin or rifampin, rifabutin and rifapentin. All are related macrocyclic antibiotics. They are obtained from the Amycolaptoses mediterraneae. Amycolaptoses mediterraneae. So from this the rifampicin is obtained. Rifampin is a semi-synthetic derivative of the rifamycin. Coming to the spectrum of the rifampin or the rifampicin, it is active against gram-positive, gram-negative bacteria like the Staph aureus and meningitis, Haemophilus influenzae, E. coli, Pseudomonas, Proteus, Klebsiella and Mycobacterium, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, Mycobacterium kanseri, Mycobacterium scrofulaceum, Mycobacterium intracellular and Mycobacterium avium. Coming to the mechanism of action of the rifampicin. Rifampicin forms stable complex with the DNA dependent RNA polymerase enzyme in the mycobacteria, leading to the suppression of initiation of chain formation in RNA synthesis. Thus it blocks the RNA synthesis in the mycobacteria. At high concentration it can inhibit RNA synthesis in the mammalian cells also. It is a bactericidal drug and acts on both intracellular as well as extracellular microorganisms. Addition of rifampicin in the regime of the tuberculosis can lead to the good sterilizing effect. So rifampicin has a good sterilizing action and it prevents the resistance also. So coming to the mechanism, it forms a stable complex with the DNA dependent RNA polymerase enzyme in the Mycobacteria, and thus by inhibiting this enzyme, that is DNA dependent RNA polymerase, it will lead to the suppression of initiation of chain formation in the RNA synthesis. So RNA synthesis is inhibited in the Mycobacteria. In this way it causes the bactericidal action. Coming to the resistance of the rifampicin, primary resistance to the rifampicin is rare. Acquired resistance develops rapidly as a one-step process. So it is not given alone, and it develops due to the mutation in the enzyme DNA dependent RNA polymerase enzyme, which reduces the binding of the drug to the polymerase. So the drug binding is inhibited or reduced and decreases the affinity of the enzyme to the drug. So there is no binding or less binding of the drug to the polymerase enzyme, and in this way the action cannot take place. And this is because of mutations in the enzyme DNA dependent RNA polymerase enzyme. Coming to the pharmacokinetics, it is given orally on empty stomach. Food decreases the absorption of the rifampicin, hence the drug is given on empty stomach. It undergoes enterohepatic circulation. It is metabolized in the liver and excreted in the bile and in the urine. Half-life of rifampicin is 2 to 5 hours. Coming to the adverse reactions of the rifampicin, rifampicin leads to the hepatitis, which is dose-related, dose-dependent toxicity, which is seen at high doses more than 600 mg per day. When there is hepatitis, you have to stop the drug. It is reversible after stopping the drug. Other reactions are like the cutaneous reaction like flushing, pruritus, rash, redness of the skin, watering of the eyes. Flu-like symptoms are there like chills, fever, headache, bone pain, malaise. Abdominal cramps, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea can be seen with the rifampicin. Along with this adverse reaction, there can also be orange discoloration of the urine. So orange discoloration of the urine can be seen, and the patient should be advised not to get panic when he or she sees the orange discoloration of the urine. So this is seen with the use of the rifampicin. Coming to the drug interactions with the rifampicin, rifampicin is a microsomal enzyme inducer. It increases or enhances its own metabolism as well as metabolism of the other drugs which are given along with the rifampicin, like the warfarin or the oral contraceptives or the oral hypoglycemics, phenytoin, protease inhibitors. Contraceptive failure has been occurred when rifampicin is combined with the oral contraceptive, and that has led to the pregnancy. So it is advised to use other methods of contraception when patient is on rifampicin. So patient should be advised to use the other methods of contraception when he or she is taking when the patient is taking the rifampicin. Now coming to the next antitubercular first line drug, that is the pyrazinamide. Pyrazinamide is bactericidal drug. It is acting at the acidic pH. So more activity of pyrazinamide is seen at acidic pH. It kills the tubercle bacilli residing in the acidic phagosomes within the macrophages. So it kills the residual intracellular bacilli and has good sterilizing effect. It kills the residual intracellular bacilli and has a good sterilizing effect. It is more lethal at sites which shows the inflammatory response because of the acidic pH. During inflammation there is a acidic pH. That's why it is more effective during the first 2 months of the disease when the inflammatory changes are present, and when the pyrazinamide is given at this stage when there is inflammation, it is highly effective because it acts more at the acidic pH. Now coming to the mechanism of action of the pyrazinamide. Pyrazinamide acts on the target of pyrazinamide is the mycobacterial fatty acid synthase 1 enzyme, synthase 1 gene, which is involved in the mycolic acid biosynthesis. So the target site is the mycobacterial fatty acid synthase 1 gene, which is involved in mycolic acid biosynthesis, and in this way it inhibits the mycolic acid biosynthesis. It disrupts the mycobacterial cell membrane and its transport function. So mycolic acid is not formed, and which are the important component of the mycobacterial cell wall. And so there is a disruption of the cell wall or the cell membrane, and its transport functions are inhibited. Resistance develops rapidly if it is given alone, and it is due to the mutation in the gene, so that there is a decreased affinity of the enzyme or the gene to the drug. So the binding is not possible, and further action of the drug cannot take place. When pyrazinamide is added to the regimen, it shortens the duration of the treatment, and the risk of relapse is also reduced. Now coming to the pharmacokinetics of the pyrazinamide, it is given by oral route. It is well absorbed, widely distributed in the body. Good penetration is seen in the CSF, in the lungs and in the liver. Metabolized in the liver and excreted in the urine. Half-life is around 9 to 10 hours. Coming to the adverse reaction of the pyrazinamide, hepatotoxicity is the important adverse reaction. Hyperuricemia is seen, gout is seen. Abdominal distress and arthralgia have also been reported. Other side effects are the flushing, fever, rash, loss of diabetes control. So the drug is contraindicated in liver disease and in gout patients, as well as in diabetic patients. Now coming to the next first line drug, that is the ethambutol. Coming to the mechanism of action of ethambutol. Ethambutol is a bacteriostatic drug acting against Mycobacterium tuberculosis, Mycobacterium cancerci, and Mycobacterium avium complex. It inhibits the growth of the mycobacteria by causing inhibition of the enzyme arabinosyl transferase, which is involved in the arabinogalactan synthesis, thereby interfering with the mycolic acid incorporation in the cell wall. So in this way it acts by inhibiting the enzyme arabinosyl transferase, which is involved in the arabinogalactan synthesis, thereby interfering with the mycolic acid synthesis and its incorporation in the cell wall. It acts on the fast multiplying bacteria or rapidly multiplying bacteria. They are more susceptible to the action of the ethambutol. Resistance develops slowly to the ethambutol. Purpose of adding ethambutol to the antitubercular regime is to prevent the development of the resistance and to hasten the rate of sputum conversion. So these are the important purpose of adding ethambutol to the antitubercular regimen. Coming to the resistance developed to the ethambutol, mycobacteria develop resistance to the ethambutol slowly, and this is due to the gene mutation in the mycobacteria, reducing the affinity of the target enzyme to bind the drug. So by reducing the affinity of the target enzyme to bind the drug due to the gene mutation. So this is the mechanism of resistance by which the mycobacteria develop resistance to the ethambutol. Coming to the pharmacokinetics, it is given by the oral route. Absorption is good. Half-life is around 3 to 4 hours. Most of the drug is excreted unchanged in the urine. It is partly metabolized. Caution is required in patients of the renal disease or renal failure. Coming to the adverse reactions of the ethambutol. Ethambutol causes optic neuritis. So this is the most important side effect of the ethambutol, that is optic neuritis. Due to optic neuritis, there is decrease in the visual acuity. The patient complains of reducing visual acuity and red-green color discrimination. So cannot identify red and green color. So there is a red-green color blindness is seen, decrease in the visual acuity and red and green color blindness. Now this optic neuritis is dose dependent, depends on the dose of the ethambutol. Higher the dose, more is the toxicity. Drug should be stopped at the first indication of the visual impairment. So as early as possible, when the patient complains of visual impairment, the drug should be stopped. Recovery occurs when the drug is stopped. It is reversible if it is stopped early as possible. When the patient is on ethambutol, the patient should be checked regularly for the visual acuity. Before starting the therapy with ethambutol, visual acuity should be tested and red-green color discrimination should be done. So after it is normal, after the visual acuity is normal, then only you have to start the ethambutol. Otherwise, the drug should not be given to the patient who has decreased visual acuity. Other adverse reactions are the rash, fever, peripheral neuritis. Contraindications to the ethambutol are the children. In children, the drug should not be given because of optic neuritis, because the children cannot report visual problems and hence it is contraindicated in children. Also, it is contraindicated in renal failure because most of the drug is excreted unchanged by the kidneys, and hence in renal failure there can be more toxicity if ethambutol is prescribed. Now coming to the next first line drug, that is streptomycin. Now you have studied streptomycin in the lecture of aminoglycosides. Streptomycin is an aminoglycoside and we have covered the pharmacology of streptomycin previously. Now let us see about its place in tuberculosis. Streptomycin is a supplemental first line drug. It is not given in all the patients. It is a bactericidal drug, but the efficacy is less than that of the INH and the rifampicin. It acts on the extracellular bacteria due to poor penetration in the cell. It cannot act on the intracellular bacteria. Poor action is seen in acidic medium, hence not suitable during the first 2 months of the disease when there is a high inflammation. It penetrates the tubercular cavities but cannot cross the CSF. So it can penetrate the tubercular cavities but cannot cross the CSF. So this is the drawback of the streptomycin. Moreover, it is having poor action in the acidic medium, acts only on the extracellular bacteria, cannot act on the intracellular bacilli, and it is having less efficacy as compared to the isoniazid and rifampicin. So it is a supplemental first line drug. Now coming to the resistance developed to the streptomycin. Resistance develops rapidly to streptomycin if it is given alone, and this is known as streptomycin resistance, or S resistant strains have been identified for Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So if the infection is because of the S resistant strains, if it is used in such infections due to the S resistant strain, there can be flourishing of infection due to the streptomycin dependence. Streptomycin dependence means infection flourishes when streptomycin is continued. So in streptomycin resistance infection or infection caused by S resistant strains, it should be stopped at the earliest due to the risk of the streptomycin dependence. Otherwise, the S resistant strain will multiply and will replace all the other bacilli. So this is a drawback of the streptomycin if it is used alone, and nowadays in India S resistant strains are more and they have been identified. Because of the need of the daily intramuscular injection and various adverse reactions, as you have studied in the pharmacology of aminoglycoside, the use is restricted. Nowadays it is a reserve alternative and it can be added to the first line drugs. Use is restricted to the maximum of 2 months. So it is a supplemental first line drug or a reserve alternative, and it can be added to the first line drugs. So with this I finished the part 1 pharmacotherapy of tuberculosis part 1. Today we have seen the classification of the anti-tubercular drugs. Then we have seen various first line drugs, four to five first line drugs we have seen. We have covered isoniazid, we have covered rifampicin, we have covered pyrazinamide, we have covered ethambutol, and we have also seen streptomycin. So in the next class we will see the doses of these drugs, we will see the remaining drugs, that is the second line drugs, and we will also see the treatment of the tuberculosis. Thank you. So thank you for your viewing and listening.